Day two. Okay, that was welcome back, everybody. This is the second afternoon session on day two of hearing stream 2. And we're hearing from Port New Zealand, and we have Ms. Levinson. Thank you for your indulgence. In the break, we've been handed up a summary statement prepared by you, which just shorter, just over a page long. I'm happy for you to take us through this, but before I do invite you to do that, I just please understand whether you've had an opportunity to consider the summary statements that the officers presented to the panel yesterday.
Yes, I did read the statement this morning.
Good. Okay. Great. To the extent that any of those matters resolve concern or add to your concerns, could you let us know along the way in terms of your presentation?
Yes, it should be included in the statement.
Okay. Right. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again today. My name is Emily Levinson, and I'm an environmental policy advisor at Horticulture New Zealand, with the responsibility to advocate for fruit and vegetable growers in district and regional planning processes in the Wairarapa. I spoke to Hort NZ's submission on hearing stream 1, and it's good to see you all again. The main concern that I covered in my written statement was about how the future urban zone chapter will manage the urban-rural interface once urban development takes place in that zone. Managing development at the boundary will be important to ensure that the highly productive land that surrounds the future urban zone can be used effectively for primary production, including fruit and vegetable growing. More specifically, I'm interested in how reverse sensitivity effects of future urban development on horticulture will be managed. An objective policy and rule framework to manage the interface is needed to give effect to policies 4 and 9 of the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land, to prioritize and support the use of highly productive land for land-based primary production, and to manage reverse sensitivity so as not to constrain land-based primary production activities on highly productive land. Managing the interface is necessary to avoid land use conflict and ensure the efficient use of both the future urban zone for urban development and the general rural zone for food production. There are setbacks for residential development from intensive farming activities in the proposed plan, but these do not apply to horticulture, since horticulture does not fall into the definition of intensive farming or intensive primary production. Housing or urban commercial activities can still introduce negative effects on horticulture through new neighbors' unrealistic expectations for noise, light, visual amenity, use of sprays, and traffic movements that are associated with a working orchard or market garden. In my analysis, I did not see where future boundary effects are strategically managed in the future urban chapter. I recognize the council officer's summary statement, which states that reverse sensitivity is managed through objectives in the rural and future urban zone chapters. I'm interested, however, in the interface as a whole and how that will be managed when the future urban zone transitions from a holding zone to residential or commercial use, with a complete objective policy and rule structure. In my written statement, I referred to a new objective, which was submitted by Federated Farmers and supported by Hort NZ in our further submission, which provided specific direction for when urban development adjoins rural sites. For the future urban objectives, this direction could also be achieved through an amendment to the Future Urban Zone Objective 3, Part E, to be more specific about managing reverse sensitivity effects when urban development occurs where it adjoins rural sites. For the policies, Future Urban Zone Policy 3 does provide policy direction to avoid activities that give rise to reverse sensitivity effects in relation to existing rural activities. But I cannot find a rule or standard that gives effect to that policy in relation to reverse sensitivity effects of new urban development on horticulture in or adjoining the future urban zone. An objective policy rule framework to manage these effects would align with the outcomes that Hort NZ sought to achieve through our original submission points. I'd also like to note and support the council officer's recommendation to replace reference to intensive farming activities in future urban zone rule 9 with intensive primary production to be consistent with the definition in the proposed district plan. This change would also be appropriate where the term is used in future urban zone rule 15 and standard 3. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Ms. Levinson. I'll kick off if you don't mind. seems to me that one of your principal concerns is the lack of an objective guiding, or objective that sets out what's to be achieved in terms of the development of future urban zone land. Given that what I'm particularly interested in is the risk of reverse sensitivity issues arising during the lifetime of the FUZ zone, before it's subzoned to an urban zone, whether that's residential or commercial or whatever. Is that what you're addressing, or are you addressing something completely different?
That is part of the risk. So if there is, say, an orchard or a market garden in or adjoining the future urban zone, and then as new residential activities are able to establish as a permitted activity, I can't see in the rule framework or standards that there's any particular setback that residential activity needs to have to manage the potential reverse sensitivity on horticulture. And that's because horticulture isn't included in the definition of intensive primary production, nor would we want it to be, because it's not an intensive activity, but just that it does not have its own setback or other method for managing those effects.
Look, I could be missing something here, but isn't that because the risk of urban development establishing on an FUZ during the lifetime of the FUZ, isn't that risk incredibly low, given that effectively the rural zone provisions of the FUZ prevail until such time as that zone is upzoned? Isn't that the issue, or are you talking about another scenario that might occur?
I guess I'm thinking about the instance up to the time that the boundary is developed. I mean, I'll say that I'll defer to the reporting officer's expertise on that, but I think that if I'm understanding what you're, yeah.
Look, it's an important issue. The
Yeah.
way the reporting officer explained it to us is that effectively the FUZ is a rural business as usual approach, and that the land use activities and subdivision that can occur are really just rural activities until such stage as, through a private plan change process that might involve a structure plan, a new zoning is put in place. So what I'm struggling to understand at the moment is what the level of risk is from urban development occurring on the FUZ prior to that point, even if it is adjoining an intensive farming or horticultural operation.
When I look at the rule framework, I see that residential activities are a permitted activity. So if new housing was to be developed in the zone, and there was horticulture adjoining that new residential activity, I'm not clear where the potential reverse sensitivity effects are managed in the rules and the standards, although there is mention in the policy and the objective.
Okay.
That's my concern.
That's useful. What's your understanding of the scale and type of residential activity that's permitted in the FUZ through effectively the underlying rural zone?
I would have to look more deeply back at the rural zone provisions, but the provisions here do allow one residential unit per site and one minor residential unit. And the setbacks that are proposed are just, I believe, 3 meters from the boundary. And for intensive farming activities, there's a larger setback.
Okay, so for existing parcels of land that have their own allotment, one residence per site.
Yes.
Any further subdivision would then be controlled by the density and allotment sizes in the rural zone, presumably.
Future urban zone subdivision requires 40 hectare balance.
40 hectare balance, yes. So it's quite so really the risk relates to the level of, or the level of intent of parcel size in a given future urban zoned block of land, presumably. Yes. Aside from the fact that these lands have been identified as future urban, given that the rural zone provisions will largely apply, is that presenting a new risk? Was that just carrying across an existing risk that was apparent in the operative district plan?
I suppose there is an existing risk. Although I guess what I'm interested in is when that development does occur, is there a need for a rule or a standard around the interface? And is that something that should be planned in advance as these, as more residential activities are developed?
When you say,
Yeah.
when you say when that development occurs, are you referring to the level of development, which is essentially one residence per site on an existing allotment?
Even one residence per site. I'm thinking of a particular instance in the Wairarapa where there's an apple orchard that was previously in a future urban zone, I believe, and then there were houses that were developed all around that apple orchard, fairly close to the boundary. And now I believe that area is zoned residential. But in the meantime, that orchardist has to manage the reverse sensitivity effects of all of those neighbors that directly adjoin their property, and manage those expectations, which constrains his ability to appropriately use his site, which is highly productive land, although because it was zoned for urban before the national policy statement for highly productive land came into effect, it won't be under the definition of the planning documents. But it's that sort of situation that would be concerning. And I'm not sure the exact parcel sizes in the future urban zone as it's currently zoned. But I know that they are not 40 hectares in size just from looking at the map. And so I think there would be some risk there. Or
Yes.
maybe it's worth looking closer into what those parcel sizes currently are.
Okay. Well, that's something we might take up with the officers. But as it stands, you'd like to see an objective and maybe some policy nuancing and some rules or standards that give effect to the policy to deal with reverse sensitivity effects occurring within the FUZ prior to it being upzoned.
Yes, that's right. And when I was reading the Section 42 report, it mentioned that having a specific setback for reverse sensitivity effects from horticultural activities wasn't necessary because there was a setback on the other side in the general rural zone. But that one only applies to intensive primary production activities and not horticulture.
Yes.
So I think that there may be the need for something to cover that particular activity.
Okay. So you're suggesting that there's a potential gap there
Yes.
because of the definition of
Intensive primary production, which, to be clear, we wouldn't want horticulture to be included in that definition because it's not an intensive activity. But there may be a different setback that's more appropriate for a less intensive primary production activity, which would also include cropping and viticulture. I believe that the intensive primary production definition just includes all livestock farming, indoor and outdoor.
Yes. Okay. Let's see if there's, thank you for that. If there's any further questions over and above my ones. Frank? Lister? Robin? Kiriana?
Oh,
No. I don't think this is something we're going to resolve today, Stevenson. Do you think there's a possibility of this being resolved through some discussion between yourself and the officers, or do you think the situation's too polarized?
I'm happy to discuss with them if they'd like to.
Yeah. I'm getting some nods here from the council officers too. I don't want this to be an open book issue though. Effectively, we need to look at the level of risk associated with development occurring within the future urban zone under the rules that are currently there. Presumably, any live zoning that will occur at a later stage would take on the zoning and policy and rule provisions of that zone and any dealings with reverse sensitivity there. So that's not for this hearing, I don't believe. We'll have a discussion with the officers and put together a timeframe for some discussion on this matter and see if we can't get you and the officers closer together on this, or at least explore that opportunity, I think. Unless there's anything else you want to say at this point that would assist?
That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your time, and we'll be in touch through the hearing administration as to the timeframe for that.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks for your appearance. The dwelling. That's right. Yeah. And as long as I need it. Few. One.
There.
Yeah.
Don't have a right to complain about action. Isn't that what we've
Comply for the bulk allocation standards. There's no need for a resource consent. No need for involving these people.
but these guys are already they're already farming here.
Yeah.
This block then gets sold.
Yeah.
And you build a house there.
Yeah.
You've got no right to complain.
Yeah. Well, that, yes.
Wasn't that what we did for restriction of reversing
I think so. Yeah.
what we did? Stop people complaining about helicopters that are prospective.
Yeah. Also, that's sure about what happens. You see it. Happens. Involve all of these people. And there's a new dwelling.
In terms of what they
To involve them in terms of any example that should be opportunity to comment on dwellings.
if they can't complain about you anyway. Hell, potentially
Possibly.
we've tried to fix
Yeah.
by the reverse sensitivity.
Yes, okay. Okay. Thank you for that brief pause. We here have submitted number 32, Harvey Norman Properties New Zealand Limited, and I believe we have Mr. Tracy online. Good afternoon, Mr. Tracy.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me all right?
Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
That's correct. Yes, thank you.
Good. And my name is David McMahon. I'm the chair of the hearings panel, and I'm joined by other commissioners that collectively represent the 3 district councils and local iwi. We've read your submission and the statement of evidence, Mr. Tracy. Have you, you've got a summary statement that's been handed up. Would you like to take us through that summary statement and we'll see if we've got any questions?
Okay, that sounds really good. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Yes,
You can probably start, probably can take paragraphs 1.1 to 1.5 as read.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, so as I was involved in preparing the submission by Harvey Norman on the proposed plan. So this evidence is in relation to submission number 32 by Harvey Norman Properties, the owner of the site at 220 High Street in Solway, Masterton. The submission made by Harvey Norman covers matters associated with the zoning of the site and definitions in the proposed plan. The particular matter that this evidence addresses relates to the primary submission point that the proposed rezoning of the site from commercial to neighbourhood centre is not compatible with and does not recognise the existing large format retail and other retail activities being undertaken at the site. While it is accepted that this matter may be more appropriately addressed via hearing stream 13 later, I consider it is important to remind the panel of Harvey Norman's position at this present time, noting that the current hearing relates to the centre zone provisions. The site presently contains a recently constructed Harvey Norman large format retail store and separate 700 square metre retail building occupied by a superette and a bike shop and cafe, 100 square metres and 300 square metres GFA respectively. These buildings and activities have been lawfully established under the current combined district plan and with a certificate of compliance received in 2020. The proposed neighbourhood centre zone is described as providing for small-scale, convenience-based business and retail activities that serve the day-to-day needs of the local neighbourhood. The zone allows for a limited range of activities at a scale appropriate to the residential neighbourhoods they are located in. As such, any retail activity.
Excuse me,
Tracy,
yeah. Do you mind pausing a moment? We've just got the fire alarm, local fire alarms
Oh.
going off.
Oh, apologies, sorry, I couldn't hear that, sorry.
It just makes for the recording hard for people to watch later if they're competing
Oh.
with you and the sirens. So
No, completely understand.
Two or three.
yeah.
Whereabouts did you start losing me?
yeah, just pause for a moment. There'll be another round of the hearing helps.
Okay.
To answer your question, 2.5.
All right, thank you.
Have we got one more?
One more, I think.
Potentially one more.
You got plenty of water for them, Brian?
Oh no.
Perhaps install the emergency vehicle rescue. Used to be the only car crash one in the Wairarapa. Or something
That's the only
similar.
I think.
Well, that's probably it, Mr. Tracy. It's quite ironic because we just actually had the fire service presenting to us in a minute.
Oh, okay.
So
What a coincidence.
maybe if you're going to start again at 2.5.
All right, so from 2.5, the site presently contains a recently constructed Harvey Norman large format retail store and separate 700 square metre retail building occupied by a superette and bike shop and cafe with gross floor areas of 400 and 300 square metres respectively. These buildings and activities have been lawfully established under the current combined district plan as per the certificate of compliance received in 2020. The proposed neighbourhood centre zone is described as providing for small-scale convenience-based business and retail activities that serve the day-to-day needs of the local neighbourhood. The zone allows for a limited range of activities at a scale appropriate to the residential neighbourhoods they are located in. As such, any retail activity with a gross floor area exceeding 100 square metres requires resource consent. This proposed neighbourhood centre zone is not compatible with and does not recognise the consented large format retail and other retail activities occurring at the site. Given these activities have only recently been established, they are likely to continue throughout and beyond the life of the new plan. That being the case, it is both desirable from a plan administration perspective and logical for this site to be rezoned to a different commercial zoning to better reflect its current compliant uses. Of the three commercial zones being considered, it is my evidence that the proposed town centre zone best recognises the current activities on the site, with retail activities being permitted under proposed rule TCZ R5. I consider that zoning the site as town centre will not detract from the existing or future viability and vibrancy of the Masterton town centre, as the large format retail and other retail activities on the site already exist, having been recently established, are likely to remain for a long period of time. The development of the site is limited by its extent, and given the proposed residential zoning surrounding it, there will be no opportunity for the current retail activities to expand. Noting that the proposed plan chooses only 3 available commercial zones under the New Zealand Planning Standards 2019, being town centre, neighbourhood centre and mixed use. It is my view that from a plan making perspective, it is more efficient to simply replace the commercial zone, the proposed town centre zone for the subject site. This must be preferred to the creation of a new zone or precinct that would only apply to this site. The town centre zoning reflects the real-world development already existing on the site, rather than the proposed neighbourhood centre zone. So in conclusion, I support Harvey Norman's request for a rezoning of the site to reflect the permitted activity status of the recently established retail activities on the site. I consider that the proposed town centre zone is the most appropriate, and I support the proposed objectives, policies and rules for this zone. I acknowledge that rezoning proposals will be considered in hearing stream 13, but consider it important to reiterate Harvey Norman's position and to also confirm my support for the town centre zone framework. Happy to answer any questions that you may have on this.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy. That's very clear. I'll just check with my colleagues as to what questions they might have. Craig?
Thank you.
Come up in hearing stream. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Here's that, no particular questions for you. I've got a
Okay.
couple myself, Mr. Tracy. And you are very welcome to present again in hearing stream 13 if you feel the need. I guess and thank you for your primary evidence too, in which you contrast the zoning and the operative plan under figure 1 and the proposed plan under figure 2. I noticed that the commercial zone's been subject to quite a bit of a carve up in the proposed district plan, and the large area's gone to a mixture of neighbourhood centre, mixed use zoning and residential zoning. Is that your observation also?
That's correct, yes.
Yes, okay. And that's left a small area that's occupied predominantly by your client as the neighbourhood centre zone.
Correct.
Do you think that might have been a factor in council deciding which zone to apply, that the scale of the land might have been better suited to a neighbourhood centre as opposed to a town centre zoning?
I suppose because they've only done a small pocket of zoning rather than making it all residential, and there's all the residential around it.
Yes.
But so yes, I think that could be a factor. But I
Yes.
suppose what I'm saying is that the neighbourhood centre zone doesn't actually reflect the real world activities on that particular site, though. And given the recent establishment, it's unlikely that there will be neighbourhood centre zone type activities occurring on that site.
Yes. You make the point that if the site was zoned town centre, then under Rule 5, the sort of activity that's there would be a permitted activity subject to compliance with relevant standards.
Yes.
What's the situation under the proposed neighbourhood centre zone? What activity status would the current development have? Have you been able to exercise your mind on that matter?
I did. I'm sorry. I've actually. One moment. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah. You understand my question?
I do. Yes. You're saying if we were to apply for consent for the current
Yeah.
activities under the proposed neighbourhood centre zone, what would the activity status be?
Yes. We can. I can put that question to the officers without putting you on the spot, if you like.
Sorry, I have looked at it, but I just didn't want to.
Yes. I'll ask Ms. Falloon.
Tell you incorrectly. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's fine. We'll just see if Ms. Falloon can assist.
It would be a discretionary activity.
Fully discretionary.
Yes.
And is that an entry level, or is that because of non-compliance with standards?
It's because of non-compliance with gross floor area.
Yes.
Yes, I confirm that's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the GFA standard in the neighbourhood centre?
It's 100 square meters.
And you're at Even, did I say 400? Or 700?
Well, the Harvey Norman Centre, yes, we've got the retail one is 700 square meters, and then there's the Harvey Norman large format retail, which is 4,000 square meters of retail floor space plus an adjoining 1,600 square meter office. Sorry, warehouse.
Okay, right.
And then they've got the separate retail building, which has got a gross floor area of 700 square meters, split between two retail tenancies of 300 and 400.
Yes, but it's okay. But it's those two tenancies that would trigger the activity status, presumably, the 300 and the 400.
Yes, and I suppose the Harvey Norman Centre as well would also be discretionary if it was to.
Yes, and did you say that was 4,000?
That's got a, yes, that's 4,000 square meters gross floor area of retail floor space. And there's a adjoining warehousing component as well.
Just for the record, what's that area?
That's 1,600 square meters.
Okay. Is this, well, I'll ask the question. Given that your client has the protection of, I think a certificate of compliance, which has the force of a resource consent, what's the risk here in terms of the local neighbourhood zone? What risk does that pose to your clients?
I suppose what it does is it restricts any future activity use within that separate retail building, or if they have any plans to modify their current store in the future, it wouldn't be whether it would be seen as being inconsistent with the neighbourhood centre zone provisions.
Okay,
So I suppose it's the purpose really is to reflect what is there currently and
Yes.
be consistent with that.
yes. Okay, you've raised an issue that I hadn't thought of, and that's you saying that if there was some internal re-subdivision of the retail space that didn't comply with the that involved tenancies of greater than 100 square metres, that would necessitate a further resource consent. Is that what you're saying?
It would do, yes. I mean, there's no intention to do that, but I suppose it's more so if they were looking to expand or something like that, it would just be.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. On that second scenario of expansion, what's the site? Panel will need to visit the site, Tracy, but does the site allow expansion to occur? Is there room on the site for expansion?
Well, that's not particularly, no. They'd need to remove car parking areas if they were to do so. So there'd need to be some quite significant changes to the built form that's recently been established.
Yes. So based on those answers to those questions, what's the net risk to your client of the change in zoning?
The risk would be associated with needing to go through a consenting process again, I suppose, for any future development. And the risk would be that it would be seen as the activity being seen as being inconsistent with the neighbourhood centre zone provisions.
Are you aware of any, thank you for that, are you aware of any plans for total redevelopment of the site and during the planning period?
No. And I understand where you're coming from in terms of why does it matter, I suppose, having this particular zone from a aspect that it's only been recently established, and therefore, yeah, what's the risk then of if you wanted to do anything else in the future. So no, I accept that.
Okay, I think that's all from me. Nothing, any questions of clarification from the officers through me? Okay, thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Do you, if you were to reappear at hearing stream 13, what additional evidence, if any, do you think you might bring to the panel?
Would probably at hearing stream 13 would just reiterate our current position. I
Yes,
don't think we'd probably have any further evidence to present.
Okay.
We felt that I wasn't sure exactly. I suppose the reason we're presenting now is we didn't want to miss the opportunity
sure.
to be heard, and respectfully understand that this may not have been the correct one, but we didn't want to find that we'd missed out, so to speak.
No, I think you're wise to have attended today. All I'm suggesting is, unless you're planning on presenting anything further, there's possibly no need to attend at hearing 13. I think the panel understand the issue. We've got to grapple with the consequences. To that extent, the officers have also heard your answers to our questions. Will now reflect on that, and they'll provide a written right of reply in 15 working days, which will be posted. That'll be posted on the webpage. So keep an eye out for that, and
Right.
that'll form the basis for the panel's deliberations, perhaps next year on this
Okay.
matter.
All right. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks for your attendance.
No, thank you for your time and consideration of this matter.
Hey. Almost exactly on time. Transpower. 118, this thing that we have online. Yeah.
You have your cell phone? I'll be waiting for somebody.
Ms. Silk, why don't you come up to the front table anyway? Just checking who else is here. It's Mr. Clark. Welcome, Mr. Clark. Scheduled at 4:05, so we'll just see how we go. And you're the last submitter for the day, so. Michael. Welcome, Ms. McLeod.
Hello, sorry if there were any technical difficulties there. I think I joined the wrong day.
It's all right. You're with us now. That's the main thing.
That's good.
We have Ms. Silk in presence in the hearing room. Which of you are going to lead off?
Okay.
So just before you do, Ms. Silk, I think this is the first presentation for Transpower, so welcome.
Thank you.
No doubt you'll be involved in other hearing streams, network utilities and national grid, etc. I'm David McMahon. I'm joined by independent commissioners, but also councillors for the district councils. and also an iwi representative. So together, the five of us make up the hearing streams panel for hearing stream 2. Are you aware of the summary statements that were produced by the council officers and presented to the panel yesterday?
Ainsley's reviewed those.
Good, that's good. Not everyone has been aware of those, so that's something we'll look at finessing and for future hearing streams, making sure that people are aware that when they're available and trying to get them available a little bit earlier than they have been up until now. Okay, Ms. Silk, we're in your hands. We've got your statement of evidence dated 12th of August. And have you got a summary statement? So have you given us copies of that?
Right.
That would be
Fabulous.
useful. Just will reduce the amount of note taking that we need to do. Okay, please lead off.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou. I'm Sarah Silk and I am joined today by Ainsley McLeod, who is appearing remotely as our expert planning witness. I am the environmental projects team leader at Transpower. My team ensures that we have all the environmental approvals needed for our large projects and works that Transpower needs to do to enable our customers to connect to the national grid. I'll take my evidence as read. However, if the panel is agreeable, I would like to provide a summary of my evidence. Transpower is a state-owned enterprise that plans, builds, maintains, owns, operates New Zealand's high-voltage electricity transmission network, known as the National Grid. The National Grid links generators to distribution companies and major industrial users. It extends from Kaikohe in the North Island to Tiwai in the South Island and includes 11,000 kilometres of transmission lines supported by towers and poles and over 170 substations across the country. Transpower has existing assets within the Wairarapa, which include 2 110 kV transmission lines and 2 substations located near Greytown and Masterton. There are several customer connection projects within the Wairarapa in the transmission in the Transpower investigation stages. These include solar farms and battery energy storage systems that would connect to Greytown and Masterton substations. Transpower also regularly carries out business as usual maintenance and upgrade works on both the transmission lines and substations in the Wairarapa. Transpower will play a critical role for New Zealand in meeting its zero carbon aspirations by both investing in its existing national grid assets and enabling connections to new sources of renewable energy. Transpower's submission seeks that appropriate planning provisions are included in the proposed Wairarapa Combined District Plan to ensure that it is able to develop, operate, maintain and upgrade the national grid to enable a reliable and secure supply of electricity to the Wairarapa region and beyond. This is the first hearing that Transpower is appearing in front of the panel. My evidence serves as an introduction to Transpower to the panel. Our intention is that you will hear from us in more details in later hearings. Unless you would like to ask any questions now, I will pass to Ms. McLeod.
I'll check with the panel to see whether there's any questions in terms of your factual presentation. No? I have one. For your 2 substations in the district at Greytown and Masterton, are they designated in the district plan?
They are, yes.
And presumably they've been rolled over into the proposed plan. Yes.
I understand that would be the intention, yes.
Okay. And apart from that, though, you rely on provisions in the district plan, particularly giving effect to matters such as the transmission corridor and the transmission yard, etc.
Correct. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that. Well, that's a nice context. Ms. McLeod, we have your statement of evidence also. Do you have a summary statement as such
I have written some speaking notes and I can email them through afterwards if that's helpful.
It would be.
Yeah, probably just before I start, I'd just like to note that in addition to relying on the provisions of the district plan, of course, there's also the National Environmental Standards for Electricity Transmission that
Yes.
set out regulations for maintenance and upgrading of lines that were existing at a certain date. But
Yes.
it sort of comes into the equation as well sometimes.
Yes, it's wrong of me to not include NESET in the calculation.
So I'll kick off. Kia ora koutou, I'm Ainsley McLeod. Look, thank you for your time today and also for accommodating me via Teams. You'll see I'm going to be very brief today, which is why it's very efficient to attend in this way. My evidence addresses how the policies of the natural open space zone and the general industrial zone relate to the national grid. And more broadly, it also addresses the relationship between the objectives and policies of the network utilities chapter and the objectives and policies in zone chapters. In my evidence, I conclude that a pathway through the zone chapter policies for the national grid is necessary to give effect to the national policy statement on electricity transmission. In respect of the natural open space zone, I agree with the recommendation in the officer's report that a pathway does exist in policy P3. And as such, I've concluded that the relief sought in Transpower's submission is not necessary.
Yes.
That was addressed in the summary statement for that from the officer for that zone, just acknowledging my acceptance of that recommendation. In respect of the general industrial zone, my evidence concludes that the strict avoid policy direction in general industrial zone P3 does not provide an appropriate policy pathway for the national grid and therefore does not give effect to the national policy statement on electricity transmission. My evidence notes that this creates tension between the zone policies and the policies in the network utilities chapter, and I set out possible solutions to resolve this tension. Now, the reporting officer addresses this in her summary statement and agrees that the plan as written would give rise to tension or conflict between the network utilities chapter and policy P3 in the proposed plan. On this basis, the summary statement includes a recommendation to amend policy P3 to provide for the operation, maintenance, upgrading or development of the national grid. This is one of the possible solutions that I suggested in my evidence. I support this revised recommendation and consider that the additional clause in the policy resolves tension between the two chapters and gives effect to the national policy statement. And that's as brief as I am today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Look, I'm not going to keep you any longer than I need to. In addition to the amendment to the policy 3, is there any need for any amendment to the rule?
No, because the rules in the industrial chapter don't apply to the national grid. It's just the policy matters.
Sounds very straightforward, Ms. McLeod.
I hope so.
I don't have anything further. Panel members? I just check with the officer or
The GIZ,
yeah.
yes, it was.
Any questions or clarification from Ms. McLeod?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sounds like we're all aligned. Thank you for your time. I'm sure you've got other things you could be doing in your new vocation. So
yes,
we'll,
indeed.
Leave you there and good luck with that with the upcoming carnival later in the year.
Yes, let's not have a clash with hearings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. That leaves the final submitter for today, Mr. Clark and Co.
Things as we're last for today, we'll make this short and brief, hopefully.
Just let us get our stuff together. Is Mr. Hooper present? Mr. Hooper's not present, is he?
No, he's not.
No, we do have evidence on behalf of yourself and Mr. Carmichael and Ms. Mackenzie, which we've taken as read.
Yeah.
Mr. Clark, I'm not from the Wairarapa, so don't assume I know everything about your property. More information you can give me, the better I am in understanding your concerns. What I think we'll do,
Do you want to put the map up?
we'll bring the map up on the screen.
Sure.
That's a technique that we're going to do zoning now.
It's a career change.
Just while we're waiting, I can't commend everyone on keeping to time. It's most unlike me. The second hearing stream in a row, we've largely kept to time, so pressure's on the deputy chair later in the year when she's chairing.
We'll be ahead of time. And but hope.
Just while we're waiting for that, can I grab some lined paper off someone, please?
Oh, okay. Out of my book.
Oh, okay, thank you. Very much. Okay. Is this the operative? This is the proposed plan, isn't it? Yep. Hathaway Road at the top.
Correct, yes. Yep.
Do you want to go up to the board and just point out the salient features for us?
Yeah, sure. So obviously speaking to our submission 250.
What's the trip hazards?
Yep, no worries. So in our submission, the proposed zone here is obviously in the proposed district plan is future urban zone, as is a much larger chunk of land across the road. So this is about 3.8 hectares of, I think, about 93 hectares in total for the
23, yes, okay.
Yeah.
That's all earmarked as if you see it in the proposed plan.
Yes, that's correct. And as you can see from the map, it's already partially divided into sections, and there's housing on it. The section across the way, or the chunk of land across the way, is primarily farmland. So our submission in brief is that we want to seek a change of designation that from the future urban zone to general residential. The basis of that obviously is because of, while master planning process is obviously extremely important, and we understand that, the items that the master planning will address, or primarily will all be in relation to the farmland area with where roads are going to go, public spaces, getting services to and from. The primary services and that are already established and already there, obviously going down Papua Road, there's water and sewer. I know there's an issue with that, and also, access to the sector or to the bits of land can be off Papua Road. So those issues of the master planning, we believe, are not applicable to our little bit of land here that we're proposing for the change.
So Mr. Clark, I've counted around 8 allotments, is that?
I think there's 9 in total.
Yeah.
I think there's, yeah,
Okay.
one in the corner there.
Do they all have a dwelling on them?
I believe they do, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Can I leap in as well as,
yeah, absolutely.
so in my understanding, in 1986, when this was zoned as subdivision, before the properties were developed, there are actually only 7 sections, and the 2 sections to the right-hand side of the map going down Papua Road, the eastern side, were then subdivided at some other stage.
Okay.
So
Those
now there's 9.
With those irregular shaped allotments that.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are obviously a result of sort of fairly different planning processes.
Right.
At different times.
And does each allotment have a different landowner?
As far as I'm aware, it does, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So Mr. Carmichael and Mr. Mackenzie and myself own these 2 properties here, and then we, the balance of.
Are you speaking with authority for all the landowners?
Not all of the landowners. Between Wayne and myself, we have had discussions with a few of the other owners,
Yes.
who are the ones that I've spoken to are in agreement with our proposal.
Sure. So can you just identify the lots that yourself, Wayne, and Ms. Donaldson, is it Donaldson? Sorry.
Mackenzie.
Mackenzie, sorry.
Yeah.
So,
So I've spoken with the immediate name.
no, which ones are you, do you have ownership of?
Oh, sorry. So 26 Papua Road is myself, and Carmichael Mackenzie is 28.
Michael Mackenzie, 28. Okay. With the, this is to the officers, were there any further submissions in opposition to this submission lodged?
I cannot recall seeing any opposition to that. Mr. O'Leary, when he did a summary statement, might have.
Oh, yes, sorry, it was Mr. O'Leary. So, yes, Mr. O'Leary, were there any further submissions in opposition to the submission by these three people? Okay, and you weren't aware of any further submissions?
No.
One further submission in support,
Okay, by,
Tumu Developments.
oh, yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Who's Fumu?
Are they a property owner?
They are developing the orchards.
That's not to do with the.
So
Okay. Just take a seat if you don't mind. And
Yeah, sure.
we just go back. Can you bring up the operative district plan? Phone?
Contaminated land layer.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, and the zoning, is that,
Current zoning.
yeah,
Rural.
yes, yeah. I just want to get a feel for the spatial extent of that zone and the proximity to the nearest non-urban zone.
There to there.
Okay. Not that clear and cover, but that's, okay. What's that, what's the name of that road? The adjoining road to,
I believe it is Wakeland. It's on the.
One to the immediate left,
yes.
it's Wakeland, and it's a stock route.
oh,
It's not actually a road in that sense.
Wakeland.
Wakeland, yeah.
And under the plan, immediately sort of behind there, running parallel to Wakeland, is an area that's proposed to be a multi-purpose zone.
Yes, okay. That rectangular area.
Yeah.
I'll jump onto the proposed plan and I'll
Yeah.
zoom out so that people can see it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, got it. Great. Okay,
The other uniqueness in terms of our little enclave of those 9 sections there is we're inside the borough zone rural. So the 50-kilometre zone is outside of the houses that are already built.
Right. Clarify, you are connected to the infrastructure, the water reticulation services,
I have a septic field and I chose to do that deliberately.
but the other properties are connected
All connected water, and they've all got people living in those homes.
and they're all connected to reticulated water.
Yep.
Yes.
As far as I'm aware, yep.
Looking at this. Maybe not that end one.
okay. Is that the blue line?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank
you
you.
had those two smaller parcels. They were subdivided after the original subdivision occurred.
And after post 1980. Yeah, correct.
And then effectively the rules changed, which left got now.
Yeah.
We surrounded by different size sections.
Yes.
Where we are, and
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good context. What else would you like to tell us?
So I guess just to iterate the points in our submission, obviously currently in Greytown, there's, at the time of the submission, there was about 20 sections on the market, which were all part of bigger subdivisions. And currently there are no sort of large subdivisions happening, from what we're informed by Russell Hooper. And obviously the chunk of land opposite on the other side of Papawai Road, by the time this all goes through the process, his indication was, it would probably be at least 6 or 7 years before, that land is probably realistically able to be developed. So the scheme that Russell sort of based it on was about 20 sections potentially could be developed within the 3.8 hectares on top of what's there. So, it would in I guess the medium term would provide some land to the market to provide some relief for, the cost of land in the interim until the big developments. I think the only other chunk of land in Greytown that is currently residential is the Molewood Orchard. But it is currently an operating orchard, and the owners indicate that they have no intention of carving that up anytime soon.
We just zoom out a little bit so we can get understanding of the spatial extent of the future urban zone beyond this property.
If I click on the future urban zone here, that might highlight it a bit better.
Right.
That highlight is just excluding those ones that won't let me do both.
That's all currently one owner, I think, is it not? And it's all leased dairy farm.
Across the road, Hammonds.
Yeah, it's Hammonds probably, isn't it? And that borders right back up onto Kurunui School and the rugby grounds and that.
So we're looking at the area bounded by the blue.
And
It's McMaster Street. Yeah, McMaster's to Papawai and then on the side of McMaster Street.
Okay.
Well, that's all the questions I have, Mr. Clark. Any questions, Craig? Alistair?
You're aware of the provisions that zone change occurred, that any future development would be subjected to obviously approval for connections and so on. So you'd be for a resource consent process at that stage.
Yes, I guess it just provides options if this went through, what we were suggesting. Very I guess aware in Russell's submission he talks about, or to us, the potential for any development could be up to 10 years away. And so why remain future build when we're actually an established wave in our own sort of right?
The only other question I have, and it's probably one more for you, but the other landowners won't be aware of this application, will they?
Yes, they will. I mean,
So you've got 9 property owners there now. 3 of you have submitted this. The other 6 know that you've submitted for this plan change?
for this rezoning.
For this rezoning?
Like I've spoken to my immediate neighbour on the other side. They're aware that we've made the submission. I can't say that I've specifically,
because they will be aware that this was ring fenced for future urban zone as part of this plan, but they won't be necessarily aware of your application to.
Correct. Yes.
They should be. The summary of submission should have outlined what the relief is concerned, so there would have been an opportunity to lodge a further submission either in support or opposition to.
So they will have been notified.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, they won't have been individually notified, but it'll be part of the public notices that would have gone out in the same way that the one we dealt with this morning was subject to the same summary of submission.
Yeah, slightly different though. That was one landowner.
Yes.
Whereas this is 9,
Yep.
and I just wonder whether this might have fallen through the loophole of your neighbours not knowing. So that's where I sort of
that's an issue for the panel to grapple with, and we'll take some advice from the officers on that. But the process normally is that any relief that's sought through through a submission needs to be summarised, open to public scrutiny, and an opportunity provided for anyone to lodge a further submission, either supporting or opposing that. Now, acknowledge that that doesn't necessarily involve direct notification to individual people, but that's no different from any other provision in the district plan.
Understood.
Okay, from my right hand side. Mr. O'Leary, was there any questions or clarification that you have through me?
No, I think the submitters have outlined their case. Well, for us to consider.
Okay, so the process now, Mr. Clark and Mr. Carmichael, is that the officers will consider the material in light of the questions that we've put. They will provide us with a written right of reply on all of the matters heard on this hearing stream in 15 working days' time. We'll convene to consider those matters. We'll probably undertake a site and locality visit to satisfy ourselves. We don't probably need your assistance with that. And then we'll ultimately deliberate on the outcome. But our decisions won't be issued until the end of the process, which will be post-May next year.
Yeah, sure.
And one hit, if you like. And that's so that we can have an integrated approach to all decision making. But thank you for your attendance.
Thank you.
It's Marine Day.
Cool. During the hearing, we'll
Haven't seen